30,000 years ago, someone was buried with nearly 3,000 ivory beads covering their body. Making those beads alone may have required years of full-time labor. This person was not a king. He was simply a wealthy person of his age. The Stone Age had no money. But that does not mean it had no rich people. So how did the wealthy really live in the deep human past? The answer may overturn what you think you know. Many people assume that the wealthy could only appear after cities, states, and money were invented. But much earlier, in the Stone Age, human societies may already have had wealthy groups. Their wealth simply did not appear as a bank balance. It appeared as differences in daily life. More reliable food, longer-lasting homes, better tools, more elaborate ornaments, stronger kin networks, and a greater chance of being remembered after death. First, we need to be clear. The Stone Age was vast. In its earlier periods, humans relied mainly on hunting and gathering. Later, in some regions, people entered the Neolithic, settled down, cultivated plants, raised animals, built houses, and stored food. The wealthy of these two stages were not exactly the same. In the earlier world, the rich looked more like people with prestige. In the later world, they looked more like families with inherited resources. In mobile hunter-gatherer life, wealth was difficult to pile up. You cannot migrate with a warehouse of grain on your back. You cannot hide a large animal carcass forever. Too many possessions become a burden. So, in the earlier Stone Age, the wealthy were often not the people with the most stuff. They were the most useful people. The hunter who could read animal tracks, the elder who understood seasons and water sources, the craftsperson who could make stone tools, or the person who could organize rituals and settle conflicts. But once people settled down, the rules changed. A house could be used for years. Grain could be stored. Land could be claimed by a family. Tools could be passed to children. Animals could reproduce. A wealthy person's day in the Stone Age may not have looked luxurious, but in every small detail, it carried a little more security than ordinary life. The first privilege of Stone Age wealth was more stable food. Ordinary people lived at the mercy of season, luck, and environment. Would there be animals today? Would there be fruit nearby? Would the weather suddenly turn? Would the reserves last through winter? A wealthy household was more likely to have storage pits, pottery, dried meat, grain, nuts, seeds, or more relatives who could work together. That does not mean they ate feasts every day. Ancient rich people were not reclining in caves while others brought them meat. They still worked. They still went hungry. They still got injured. But when famine, cold, or a failed hunt arrived, they had a thicker buffer. An ordinary person might have to risk going out to search for food. A wealthy family might still open a storage pit and hold on a little longer. This is what Stone Age wealth really looked like. Not a rich meal every day, but the ability to collapse a little later than everyone else when the bad days came. Stone Age houses were not mansions either. In many Neolithic settlements, wealthy families did not necessarily live in huge buildings. The difference was often hidden in the details. Whose house had been repaired again and again? Whose home had more storage space? Whose walls carried more complex designs? Whose ancestors were buried beneath the floor? Whose living space continued across generations? Çatalhöyük, in what is now Turkey, is a classic site for studying Neolithic settled life. It had dense housing, wall paintings, reliefs, and symbolic art. But it was not like a later city with a clear palace and a visible slum. It shows us that early wealth was sometimes not about having a bigger house. It was about having a house that could accumulate identity. For people of that world, a home was not just a place to sleep. It was also a storeroom, a workshop, a kinship center, and a memorial to ancestors. The longer a family could maintain a home, the closer it came to what wealth meant in that age. Modern rich people signal status with luxury watches, expensive cars, and jewelry. What did Stone Age elites use? The answer is ornaments. Animal teeth, shells, feathers, bone beads, stone beads, ivory beads. To us, they may look primitive. At the time, they could be extremely expensive because what made them valuable was not the material, it was time. The Paleolithic burials at the Sungheir site in Russia are famous. Archaeologists found red ochre, mammoth ivory beads, long spears, and complex grave goods. Imagine making one ivory bead in a world with no metal tools, no drilling machines, and no factories. It meant cutting, grinding, drilling, and threading. One bead was already difficult. A garment covered in hundreds or thousands of beads was not ordinary decoration. It was labor made visible on the body. So Stone Age high fashion was not silk and diamonds. It was a decorated garment that other people did not have the time, skill, or resources to make. Wherever the wearer went, it sent a message. Behind me there is labor, there are resources, there are relationships, and there is status. Ancient wealthy people were not necessarily lazy. In fact, a high-status person often had to perform more social functions. They might organize hunts or harvests, distribute food, manage kinship relations, take part in or lead rituals, and maintain influence through feasts, gifts, and marriage ties. In a small-scale society, feeding others was not just generosity. It was a display of power. If you could bring out food, it meant you had reserves. If you could host people, it meant you had capacity. If you could draw a crowd to your home, it meant you were not ordinary. When people ate your food, they remembered your help. Later, when you needed labor, alliance, or marriage ties, those obligations could turn into resources. So the life of a Stone Age wealthy person was not simply, I own the most. It was, I can make others move around me. In a world without currency, social obligation itself was an account. The true power of an ancient rich person was not that he lived well today. It was that his children were more likely to live well tomorrow. By the Neolithic, land, houses, tools, livestock, stored food, and kin relationships could all accumulate. And they could be passed to the next generation more easily. If a child was born into a household with better resources, he grew up closer to stable food, better tools, stronger protection from relatives, and more advantageous marriage opportunities. What he inherited was not a bank card. It might be a good plot of land, an old house, a set of tools, a network of relatives, and the recognition other people gave to that family. That may be how the Stone Age version of a rich kid appeared. The child was not necessarily smarter than others, not necessarily stronger either. But from birth, he stood closer to food, protection, and opportunity. If we summarize the life of Stone Age wealthy people in one sentence, it is not they lived in luxury. It is they lived with a little less fear. They still feared cold, disease, wild animals, and famine. But compared with ordinary people, they had a little more reserve, a little more help, a little more prestige, and a few more ways out. When disaster came, ordinary people had very few choices. Wealthy households had more. An ordinary person might risk their life for the next meal. A wealthy household might be able to wait. An ordinary person who got injured could quickly be crushed by survival pressure. A person with status was more likely to be cared for. An ordinary person might be buried simply after death. An important person might receive the group's time, effort, burial rituals, and memory. So the most precious thing in that age was not pleasure. It was certainty. The wealthy were not people living far away from danger. They were people more likely to survive when danger arrived. Today, when we think of the rich, we think of money, property, stocks, and companies. But if we strip away those modern shells, their basic function is surprisingly similar to Stone Age wealth. Reduce risk, expand choice, mobilize other people, pass advantages to the next generation, and make a name more likely to be remembered. Stone Age wealthy people had no banks, but they had storage pits. No mansions, but long-maintained homes. No luxury brands, but ornaments that were difficult to make. No written family trees, but ancestral burials, kin alliances, and social memory. In the end, wealth was first not a number, not metal, not paper money. The earliest wealth was a state of life. You could resist hunger better than others, mobilize relationships better than others, protect your descendants better than others, and avoid being forgotten more easily than others. The wealthy of the Stone Age may never have said, "I am rich," but their lives said it for them. I have food. I have a home. I have people willing to help me. My children will inherit my advantages. And after I die, I will not disappear immediately. Humans later invented money, cities, states, and social classes. But the oldest meaning of wealth may never really have changed. To be wealthy means this: when tomorrow becomes dangerous, you have a better claim on survival than others.